This Ag Vision program is made possible through the generous support of Syngenta Seeds NK brand. The results you need, the freedom to choose. And by Farms.com. Ag news, market prices, ag careers, and farm real estate. You'll find it all at Farms.com.
Well, we have spoken in the past with Donald Cooper, who explained the 4 currencies that most typically cause us to make buying decisions. Price, of course, time, feeling safe, and feeling special. It appears, however, as value systems of consumers shift, maybe their currencies do also. One word that appears to trigger at least some consumer spending decisions is the word local. What does it mean? Joining us to help us explain the potential opportunities and put this into some context is Elbert van Donkersgoed. He's the Executive Director of the Greater Toronto Area Agricultural Action Committee. And of course, Elbert has been on this program before, but this is your first time on this program with the mandate to enhance local food in the GTA specifically. Welcome back.
Glad to be here, Kevin.
Now, people will know you a lot in Ontario, but right across the country. You've been involved in farming and farm organizations most of your life.
Right.
Tell us, as you're speaking to a farmer, why a farmer should be the least bit interested in the word local.
There's 2 basic reasons. One is that the world around us is shifting. There's a whole bunch of things happening around us, like energy pricing, like the cost, our whole concern about climate change, and a whole bunch of those environmental things at some point come down to local as well, especially local food. And so one of the key things that happening to the consumer is that one of the best ways to be green, one of the best ways to be wildlife friendly, one of the best ways to be in touch with your own environment and keep your footprint in the environment small is to think local. So that's one of the first reasons why consumers are shifting towards local. The second is that there has always been a pent-up demand for local, but we've kind of ignored it in our farming business. You know, back in the 60s and 70s, we went all out with new technology and went for bulk generic commodity production, and we've poured our energy into that for the last quarter century plus, and we've kind of ignored the local food market. It's always been there, but we've kind of set it aside because we saw the future for agriculture in Ontario as being doing well on the international commodity markets. Well, the reality is that that future has become gray, if not dim, and I'm cautious about that future. So I say to any farmer, can you really expect to meet head-on the competition that you're facing from Brazil? Even so, we get a bit of improvement in corn price. Can you really expect the Brazilians not to react to that and take care of that, turn this into a short-term spike in corn prices? And so one of these days, the folks in the Ukraine are going to get their act together. And they've got resources that are better than ours here in Ontario. And on top of that, we've got some high costs, like expensive land, expensive labor. How are we going to keep our costs down for a commodity-based drive? So the second reason is there's a dimmer future for bulk generic production. So both reasons are creating a bigger future for local food.
Now, when we look at this again from the farmer's perspective, new ideas come out all the time, value-added, new generation co-ops, and some of them roll their eyes and go, you know, these are academics spewing forth. If you look at the word local, is there any verifiable data anywhere, Canada, US, elsewhere, where this is actually working and that it actually means something to the consumer?
That's difficult to answer because there aren't good enough surveys to say that. There's some good surveys, for example, one by the Leopold Center in Iowa that has looked at various phrases describing words, and 70% will say locally grown by family farmers is their preferred choice, if it's available. And all of the surveys that are done tend to have if available attached to them, and those ifs are fairly important because consumers are finding that when they go to the grocery store, they're willing. There's a very high percentage of consumers willing to buy local, but it needs to be convenient. And in most cases, local isn't convenient.
Okay.
And so the actual action, or part of the focus that needs to happen for the future, is that local needs to be convenient. And I don't doubt that the purchase of local would be much higher if convenient.
Now, if we don't have a lot of data that says that this works, why are, for instance, you mentioned you were in Britain recently, and they are seriously embracing this concept. So there's got to be some data someplace that says, you know what, this is meaningful to a consumer.
The shift is happening, and those who are trying it are finding success. So, for example, when organic first got started as a method of production, there was a kind of an assumption that it was also local and that you knew the farmer, that you had a connection with the farmer. Of course, organic grew enough, and all of a sudden, you know, we now import most of our organic, and you kind of say, whoa, it wasn't really the intention of organic to be imported organic. And in the UK, there's a fair bit of reaction. The UK, there's a very strong organic market, but there's also a strong reaction to the fact that some of it is being, or a good portion of it is being imported. And so there's a whole new movement happening in the UK that says, but we really want local production, and that local is actually more important. Local is actually more important than organic. At the conference we had on November the 25th at Black Creek Pioneer Village, the 4 organizations, including the GTA Agricultural Action Committee, put on a conference, and we invited Ipsos Reid to come and tell us, what do you know from your surveys over the years about consumers and local? And they had some data, but they went out and did a separate survey, and they were able from that survey to tell us, they asked the question, when buying food in the past 6 months, how often did you buy locally grown food when it was available? Always and usually 42%. Now that's a good chunk of the market. 42% are always or usually buying local when it's available. And there's the hitch. We don't necessarily make it convenient. If we don't make it convenient, local gets passed by.
Interesting. And so in the UK, for instance, these farmers that you saw that are involved in some of these local initiatives, is it working, and are they receiving any kind of premium? I guess that's always the bottom line question, isn't it?
There isn't a guarantee in local for premium, but there is a guarantee of market access, and a better market access than elsewhere, and that is appealing enough to most entrepreneurs. Now, the local initiative in the UK has grown enough that Tesco, that's their biggest retailer, that Tesco is opening 4 new regional buying centers in order to buy local. They're actually going to shift, and I haven't heard, but I'm saying to those who are involved in this, but then they've got to have dedicated shelf space in the store. If they're really going to make it convenient to the consumer, we need dedicated shelf space in the big stores for local. That will really drive local, because if Tesco just does this buying from regional buying and buys local, but then simply buries the local in with everything else, and folks have to hunt for it, make it work make them work to find the local, it won't work very well. In my estimation, you have to make it convenient for it to fly.
Now, what is your impression then of the UK system? They're certainly being aggressive in redefining the future of their industry over there.
They're coming from a similar history to ours, where in the 60s and 70s they went all out to bulk generic commodity production. They went in that direction in spades, and just like we did here, and did reasonably well with it for a time, especially when the European Union came along and started pouring significant subsidies into the whole bulk production system. But then over the last 15 years, the European Union has slowly been backing off, and then they got hit with mad cow disease, and they got hit with foot and mouth disease, and so the European public, especially the UK public, has really backed off from wanting to support bulk production. So now their subsidy system still exists, but it's totally decoupled from production. It's now linked to everything but production for the UK farmer. And so the UK farmer is facing the reality that if he's going to be in the bulk generic commodity production, then he's got to compete with world markets. They've been put in that position faster than the rest of Europe, because the UK government has moved faster to decouple than the rest of Europe, and they're looking at the reality that there's a lot of commodities that they've been in. There's no money to be made on a commodity basis. It's one of the reasons some of the folks that invited me over there are part of the Farm Crisis Network. It's one of the reasons why their Farm Crisis Network is a busy business, because a lot of farm families are struggling. Here you've done bulk, you've done commodity production successfully for 30 years. You still really want to farm for another 5 or 10 years, but you don't know how to turn it over to the next generation because there's no future in bulk. And the best example was I got a tour of the college farm for the Royal Agricultural Centre at Sinksetter, which, by the way, that college is the original example of the University of Guelph Agriculture College. Even their main building looks a lot like Johnson Hall at the University of Guelph. And the manager, as he gave me a tour of the place, was telling me that 2 years ago he offered his resignation to the board of the college, saying, I can't make you any money. Whatever I do, and here's all the options I've studied, whatever commodity I'm producing, I can't make you any money. But the board said, have you considered organic? He hadn't. He said, well, I'll go back. And he came back with another proposal, and 18 months ago he took the whole 3,000-acre college farm organic, and he's making money. Because the whole system of the subsidy system is now totally on a different basis, not on commodity production. It's all focused on these other values that the UK has now said is what we value from the countryside. We want you to produce food, but we want you to produce so that it also produces wildlife, so that it also provides bird feed in the wintertime. So, for example, on that college farm now, every cash crop field, and they're fairly small fields, has a 6-meter buffer around the outside, which is planted to grasses that have seeds for songbirds in the winter. And he gets well paid for that 6 meters.
Interesting.
For feed for songbirds in the winter.
And you viewed, so I mean, would you characterize the transition that they're making to be fairly aggressive?
In the UK, the transition is aggressive.
And why is it aggressive?
I think the experience with BSE and the experience with foot and mouth and the notion that this bulk system that they were into without enough care for the environment in general was going to run, or was running into trouble, was going to run into more trouble, and they really wanted to back off to a lighter footprint in the environment. I think the UK has really made that commitment, and they've got the money from the European Union to do it with, because they've decoupled the subsidies. They're still making the payments to the farmers, but it's got nothing to do with production.
Now, a lot of people watching this will say, yeah, but you know what, European, the EU, UK, they're different from us. So in viewing what you saw, what do you feel that's very positive there that we can embrace that isn't unique to that culture?
What can we embrace? We can embrace the notion that we can farm with a lighter footprint in the environment and expect over time the public to value that. There's no way we can move as fast as they are, because their public is, I don't know whether it's fair to say way ahead of us on that or not, but their public is at a different level of appreciating wildlife and birds and concern for the countryside. It's just the fact that they have all these walking trails in the countryside and their public access walking trails. They've got a different connection to the countryside as public than we do here. So it's difficult to say that our consumers are anywhere near theirs are. And secondly, we don't have the pot of money that the European Union has and has on the table for this, because this is what the change that they're making is big bucks. There's big bucks involved in making this change, and there's going to need to be a continuous major cash flow from the public to the farm community if this system that there's now emerging is going to survive. If the college farm at the Royal Agricultural College is going to keep doing what it's doing, it's going to need to get those fairly substantial payments, because as Charlie Hunter Smart said to me, half of his cash flow is from the public payments.
Interesting. Well, and there's so much more about this we could talk about, and we will actually talk about more of this local subject moving forward. And if people out there watching would like more information about this word local, or what the Greater Toronto Area Agricultural Action Committee is doing to enhance local food systems, they can find some of these documents online at GTA Local Food. That's gtalocalfood.ca. Elbert, thank you for visiting with us here today.
Most welcome.